My name is Katherine Mitchell, 32 years old, and I've spent the last decade of my life developing what I called quantum neural interface technology. While I lay in a hospital bed recovering from complete exhaustion, my own family was secretly trying to sell my life's work for a mere $3.5 million. That same research just got licensed for $4.2 billion. The difference between these numbers represents how close I came to losing everything I had sacrificed for. Before I dive into how my own blood tried to cash in on my life's work, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you value innovation and loyalty. Growing up in Boston, I was always drawn to understanding how the universe worked at its most fundamental level. My bedroom walls weren't covered with posters of bands or movie stars but with diagrams of atomic structures and equations. My parents recognized my fascination with physics early on, my father Robert a successful investment banker and my mother Diane high school literature teacher provided me with every science book and kit they could find. While they encouraged my intellectual pursuits, there was always an underlying pressure. Katie, my father would say, with a mind like yours, you could revolutionize an industry and make millions. He meant well, but his definition of success always had a dollar sign attached to it. I breezed through high school and was accepted to MIT at 17. Those undergraduate years laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Professor Elizabeth Warren, no relation to the politician, took me under her wing during my sophomore year after I challenged one of her quantum mechanics theories during a lecture. Rather than being offended, she invited me to join her research team. "You've got something rare, Katherine," she told me once while we worked late in the lab. "You don't just see the patterns, you see the spaces between them." My doctoral work at Stanford focused on the intersection of quantum computing and neural network. While most researchers were trying to make quantum computers work like traditional computers but faster, I became obsessed with a different question. What if we could create interfaces that work more like the human brain, utilizing quantum properties like superposition and entanglement to process information the way neurons do, but at a quantum level? My dissertation earned me recognition in academic circles, but it was just the beginning. The real work started after graduation when I rented a small warehouse space in Cambridge and converted it into a makeshift lab. I poured every dollar of my modest savings and research grants into equipment. The first year was brutally discouraging. Experiment after experiment failed. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, sleeping on a cot in my lab most nights. During this period, my family's interest in my work waned considerably. My mother would call weekly with increasing concern. "Honey, there are excellent teaching positions at several universities," she would suggest gently. "You could have stability, benefits, normal working hours." My father was more blunt. "Katherine, you're burning through money with nothing to show for it. At least let me introduce you to some investors who could provide proper funding and guidance." I refused. I knew that the moment I accepted outside investment at this stage, I would lose control of the research direction, and I was close to something. I could feel it. The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, after 18 months of dead ends. I had been experimenting with a new type of superconducting material as a substrate for my neural interface prototype. As I adjusted the magnetic field strength and temperature, something unexpected happened. The quantum states stabilized in a pattern that mimicked neural firing sequence. I stared at the readings in disbelief, running the test again and again. By dawn, I had verified the results 12 times. I had found a way to maintain quantum coherence in a structured pattern that could potentially interface with biological neural systems. I sketched out the theoretical framework until my hand cramped, filling notebook after notebook with calculations. This was the moment I began building my team. I needed people I could trust implicitly with research that could potentially change computing forever. Jessica Alvarez, a brilliant quantum physicist I'd met at Stanford, was my first call. Marcus Y., a neurobiologist with programming expertise, was the second. Both joined me within weeks, taking significant pay cuts from their corporate jobs because they believed in the vision. With our combined expertise, we secured a modest research grant from the National Science Foundation. It wasn't enough, but it kept the lights on while we developed our first functioning prototype. As our work progressed and word began to spread in scientific circles, my family's interest suddenly rekindled. My father started asking detailed questions about patent applications. My brother Ryan, who worked in venture capital, began dropping by the lab unannounced. "Just wanted to see what my genius sister is up to," he'd say, eyes scanning our equipment and notes. "You know, if you need help with the business side, That's literally what I do for a living. I kept him at arm's length, sharing only what had already been documented in our patent applications. Cousin Lee was different. She had a background in biomedical engineering and asked thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in the science. I gradually let her get closer to the project, explaining our breakthroughs and challenges. She became a regular visitor, often bringing dinner for the team during our late nights. "This is revolutionary, Katie," she told me one evening as I showed her our latest test results. "You're going to change everything with this technology." I believed her enthusiasm was genuine. That was my first mistake. Our early journal publications met with significant skepticism from the scientific community. One prominent reviewer dismissed our work as quantum mysticism dressed up as neuroscience. But as we refined our prototypes and data accumulated, the skepticism began to give way to cautious interest. By the end of our third year, we had a working prototype that could read and write simple neural patterns using quantum principles. The implications were staggering: computing systems that could process information more like human brains but with the advantages of quantum mechanics, interfaces that could potentially communicate directly with neural tissue, and entirely new approaches to artificial intelligence. What we were creating wasn't just an incremental improvement in computing technology. It was an entirely new paradigm. The true game changer came in our fourth year. We had been struggling with quantum decoherence, the tendency of quantum systems to lose their quantum properties when interacting with the environment. This was the main obstacle preventing our neural interfaces from working with complex systems. I had been experimenting with a layered approach, using specially designed superconducting materials as buffers between quantum components. After months of adjustments and failures, I created what we later called the coherence bubble, a stable quantum environment that could interface with classical systems while maintaining its quantum properties. The first successful test on a complex neural system happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. We had constructed an artificial neural network modeled after the visual cortex of a mammalian brain. When we connected our interface, we expected modest improvements in processing capability. What happened instead left us speechless. The system not only processed visual data but began developing novel recognition patterns spontaneously, learning and adapting at a rate we had never seen before. "Holy shit," Marcus whispered, staring at the monitor displaying the system's activity. "It's not just working. It's evolving." Jessica grabbed my arm so hard it left marks. "Katherine, do you understand what this means?" I did. We had created something that could revolutionize not just computing but potentially medicine, communications, artificial intelligence. The list of applications was staggering. That evening, we filed our most important provisional patent, documenting the coherence bubble technology in exhaustive detail. Word spread quickly through the scientific community. Invitations to speak at conferences flooded in. Prestigious journals that had previously rejected our work now reached out asking for submissions. The first venture capitalists came calling within weeks. "We'd like to discuss a series of funding round," said a representative from Horizon Ventures during our first meeting. "We're thinking an initial investment of $50 million, with the option to increase to $100 million depending on developmental milestones." The numbers were dizzying. From struggling to keep the lights on, we suddenly had people offering 8-figure investments. I declined them all, much to the confusion of the VC and the horror of my family. "Are you out of your mind?" my father shouted during a tense dinner at my parents' home. "Do you have any idea what you're turning down? These are once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Dad, if we take investment now, we lose control," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "The technology isn't ready for commercialization. There are ethical implications we need to work through." "Ethics don't pay the bills," he countered, his face reddening. "Let me handle the business side. That's what I've done successfully for 40 years. My brother Ryan was more strategic in his approach. He started attending every public demonstration we held, networking with the scientists and industry representatives they aimed to see our technology. "I'm just supporting my sister," he would say with his practiced venture capitalist smile. "Making sure she has the connections she needs to succeed." My mother's approach was more emotional. "We just want to make sure you're protected, dear. These big companies could take advantage of you. Family is the only one you can really trust to have your best interests at heart." Even Lee, who I had considered a genuine ally, began asking increasingly detailed questions about our patents and legal protections. "Have you considered setting up a holding company for the intellectual property?" she asked one day. I know some people who specialize in protecting breakthrough technologies from corporate predators. In retrospect, the warning signs were all there. I just couldn't see them through the fog of exhaustion and stress that had become my constant state. Our small team was making breakthrough after breakthrough, but the pace was unsustainable. We implemented strict security protocols for demonstrations. No recording devices, limited information in presentations, and confidentiality agreements for everyone who walked through our door. Despite the substantial offers coming in, we accepted only minimal grant funding to maintain our independence. The pressure was building from all sides. Scientific peers wanted more publications. Industry wanted products. Investors wanted returns. Family wanted decisions. And through it all, we were navigating uncharted scientific territory with potentially world-changing implications. I started experiencing migraines for the first time in my life. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. My diet consisted almost entirely of caffeine and whatever food was brought to the lab. Jessica and Marcus urged me to take breaks, but there was always one more test to run, one more problem to solve. "Katherine, you're going to break if you keep this up," Jessica warned me after finding me asleep at my workstation for the third night in a row. "The technology won't matter if you're not here to complete it." I should have listened. But I was so close to our next major milestone, a neural interface that could potentially help patients with certain types of brain injury. Just a few more weeks, I told myself. Then I would rest. I never got those few more weeks. The collapse happened during a demonstration for representatives from the National Institutes of Health. We were showing how our interface could potentially help restore neural pathways in patients with traumatic brain injuries. I had been awake for nearly 72 hours straight, surviving on energy drinks and sheer determination. Halfway through my presentation, the room started to spin. My words slurred, and the next thing I knew, I was looking up at the concerned faces of my team and the alarmed NH representatives. "Don't move," Jessica was saying, her voice sounding strangely distant. "The ambulance is coming." I tried to protest, to get back up and continue the presentation, but my body had finally surrendered to months of abuse. By the time I reached the hospital, I was barely conscious, a body in the early stages of organ distress from extreme exhaustion. The diagnosis was severe nervous exhaustion complicated by neural inflammation. My brain had essentially begun to swell from overwork and stress. The irony wasn't lost on me even in my compromised state. I had been developing neural interface technology while damaging my own neural system. "You need complete rest," Dr. Patel told me firmly. "No work, minimal stimulation, limited visitors. We're talking weeks, not days." The forced isolation was perhaps the cruelest part. After living and breathing my research every waking moment, I was suddenly cut off from it entirely. My phone was restricted to 1 hour of use per day to avoid cognitive stress. Visitors were limited to 15 minutes twice daily. Jessica and Marcus came faithfully every day, bringing brief updates on the research and assurances that everything was under control. "We've paused all demonstrations," Jessica told me. "The team is focusing only on maintaining our current systems and documenting the work you've already completed." "The NH people were actually impressed by what they saw before you collapsed," Marcus added, trying to lift my spirits. "They said they'd reschedule when you're better." My family visited too, of course. My mother brought homemade food that the doctors mostly wouldn't let me eat. My father brought business books I didn't have the energy to read. Ryan came with sympathy that never quite reached his eyes. And Lee brought flowers and seemingly genuine concern. It was during the third week of my hospital stay that I began to sense something was wrong. Jessica's updates became vaguer, with fewer specific details about lab activities. Marcus seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact during his visits. Then came the phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear. I had been dozing when the sound of my brother's voice in the hallway outside my room woke me. "Dad, the TerraCore people need an answer by Friday," Ryan was saying in a hushed voice. "If we wait until she's discharged, we might lose the offer entirely." There was a pause as he listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. I know. But the doctors say it could be another 3 weeks, and TerraCore won't wait that long. We need to move now while she's still indisposed." Another pause. "Lee got us everything we need from the lab. The paperwork is ready. We just need to pull the trigger." My blood ran cold. What paperwork? What had Lee taken from the lab? What was TerraCore, and what offer was my brother referring to? The next day, a nurse inadvertently gave me a piece of the puzzle. Your family brought some business associates to visit yesterday while you were sedated for your tests, she mentioned casually while checking my vitals. Very professional-looking people. They seemed concerned about your recovery. Business associates. I hadn't authorized any business meetings, and certainly not while I was unconscious. I used my limited phone time to call Jessica immediately. Has anyone unusual been to the lab recently? I asked without preamble. Her hesitation told me everything before she even spoke. Katherine, I think we need to talk, but not over the phone. I'll come by this evening. Jessica arrived looking worried and exhausted. After ensuring no one could overhear, she revealed what had been happening during my hospitalization. Her brother and father have been holding meetings with representatives from a company called TerraCore Technologies. They've been presenting themselves as your business representatives while you're ill. They have no authority to represent me or the technology, I said, feeling my heart rate increasing. I know that. Marcus knows that. But they brought your cousin Lee to the lab last week with a letter they claimed was from you, authorizing her to collect research documentation for safekeeping during your recovery. I never wrote any letter. Lee has no authorization to access anything. Jessica nodded grimly. The signature looked off to me, but she had your ID badge somehow. She took copies of the patent applications and the coherence bubble documentation. My sense of betrayal was so profound it felt like a physical pain. Lee, who I had trusted, had been working with my family to access my research. But for what purpose? The answer came the next day when my brother visited, bringing his briefcase. When he went to the bathroom, I did something I never thought I'd do. I quickly searched his bag. Inside was a folder labeled TerraCore Acquisition. I only had moments to scan the contents, but what I saw made me feel physically ill. It was an acquisition offer from TerraCore Technologies for $3.5 million for all intellectual property related to our quantum neural interface technology. The paperwork had been prepared as though I had already agreed to the deal. Most disturbingly, there was a medical power of attorney document, unsigned, that would give my father authority to make business decisions on my behalf due to my diminished capacity. They weren't just trying to sell my technology, they were preparing to declare me incompetent if I refused. I quickly replaced the documents before Ryan returned, my mind racing. I needed to act, but from my hospital bed with limited contact and resources, what could I do? I decided to force a confrontation. The next day, I asked the nurse to arrange for my family to visit together, claiming I wanted to discuss my recovery plan. My father, mother, brother, and cousin Lee all arrived that afternoon, seemingly pleased by my request. I waited until they were all seated around my hospital bed, making small talk about my improving condition, before I dropped the pretense. So when were you planning to tell me about selling my research to TerraCore for $3.5 million? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. The room went silent. My mother's face drained of color. My father and brother exchanged glances. Only Lee had the decency to look ashamed, her eyes fixed on the floor. Katie, my father began, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used for difficult business negotiations, we've only been exploring options to secure your future while you recover. By forging my signature, by stealing my research documentation, by preparing to have me declared incompetent, I countered. Ryan leaned forward, his expression hardening. You're in no condition to negotiate right now. The doctors say you've had a complete breakdown. TerraCore's offer won't be on the table forever, and frankly, it's more than generous for unproven technology. Unproven, I nearly laughed. You have no idea what you're talking about. And you have absolutely no right to negotiate on my behalf. My mother reached for my hand, tears welling in her eyes. We're only thinking of your health, dear. This stress, this pressure you've put on yourself, it's destroying you. If you sell the research, you can rest, recover, maybe teach at a university. I pulled my hand away. This isn't about my health. This is about you seeing an opportunity to cash in on my work while I'm vulnerable. That's unfair, my father said sharply. We're your family. Everything we do is for your benefit. Is that why you consulted lawyers about controlling my assets? Is that why you approached my research team with offers to stay on under new management? Is that why you had Lee steal my documentation? Lee finally looked up, her face flushed. I didn't steal anything. I was trying to help protect your work while you were ill. By giving copies to my father and brother to shop around to the lowest bidder, the confrontation escalated. My father's reasonable facade cracked, revealing the anger beneath. You're being incredibly ungrateful, he snapped. Do you have any idea how much time we've invested in trying to salvage this situation? You collapsed in front of government officials. Your reputation is in tatters. We're offering you a dignified exit with financial security. I don't want an exit. This is my life's work, not some failing business to be liquidated. Ryan pulled out the folder I had discovered the day before, slapping it down on my bed. TerraCore's offer is a done deal. All we need is your signature. If you refuse to see reason, we'll proceed with the competency hearing. The doctors will support it. You've been experiencing paranoia and delusions according to your charts. I felt as though I'd been physically struck. They had been reviewing my medical records, looking for ammunition to use against me. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that for a moment I couldn't speak. My mother must have misinterpreted my silence as consideration. It's for the best, Katie. Once this is behind you, you can start fresh, maybe take that teaching position at Boston University that you were offered last year. I looked at each of them in turn. The family who had raised me, supported me, and now planned to strip me of everything I had worked for. In my father's eyes, I saw only the calculation of profit. In Ryan's, the satisfaction of taking control. In my mother's, a willful blindness disguised as concern. And in Lee's, a guilt that did nothing to stop her participation. Get out, I said quietly. Katie, be reasonable, my father started. Get out, I shouted, triggering the heart rate monitor to alarm. Get out before I call security and have you removed. A nurse rushed in, alarmed by my elevated vital signs. What's happening here? Miss Mitchell needs calm. These people are not authorized visitors anymore, I told her, my voice shaking with rage and betrayal. Please have them escorted out. As security was called to remove my protesting family, I heard my brother's parting threat. This isn't over, Katherine. You can't run a company from a hospital bed. TerraCore won't wait forever, but there are other buyers. Sign, or we proceed with the competency hearing. After they left, I lay in my bed, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The people I should have been able to trust most in the world had just revealed themselves as opportunists waiting to profit from my vulnerability. But their betrayal had cleared my mind like nothing else could have. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The moment visiting hours ended and the hospital quieted for the night, I called Jessica from my room phone. I need your help, I said when she answered. My family is trying to sell the technology to TerraCore for $3.5 million. They've threatened to have me declared incompetent if I don't cooperate. Jessica's response was immediate and resolute. Tell me what you need. We established a secure communication channel using an encryption protocol we had developed for our lab communications. Marcus joined the call, and together we began crafting a counter strategy. First, we need to lock down the lab and all research, I instructed. Change access codes, secure the servers, implement the emergency protocols we established. Already done, Marcus assured me. After Jessica told me about Lee's visit, we revoked all outside access and moved the essential components to the secure facility at the university. Good. Next, we need legal representation, someone not connected to my family or their firms. Jessica had an answer ready. I've reached out to Nathan Lee. He was in our doctoral program at Stanford before he went to law school. He specializes in intellectual property now. He can be here tomorrow morning. Nathan had been a friend during my Stanford days, and I knew he was both brilliant and ethical. Perfect. And we need someone from the university's technology transfer office. Professor Williams might be able to help there. Professor Alan Williams had been my undergraduate mentor at MIT and remained a trusted advisor. Despite being in his 70s, he still wielded considerable influence in academic circles. I'll call him first thing in the morning, Jessica promised. We should also document everything, Marcus suggested. Your family's unauthorized access, the forged signatures, the threats, all of it. And we need to reach out to Melissa Chen at Tech Innovator magazine, I added. She's covered our work before, and she has a reputation for investigative reporting. Having the media aware of what's happening could provide some protection. As we formulated our plan, I felt my strength returning. This was what I did best, solving complex problems under pressure. The difference was that this time, the problem was personal. The next morning, Nathan Lee arrived at my hospital room with a digital recorder and a determined expression. Let's document everything, he said after a brief greeting. Then we're going to file for an emergency injunction against your family to prevent them from taking any action regarding your intellectual property. I spent 2 hours recording every detail I could remember of my family's actions, from the earliest signs of their interest in commercializing my research to the explicit threats made the previous day. By afternoon, Professor Williams had arrived, bristling with indignation when he heard what had transpired. "This is outrageous," he declared, pacing my hospital room despite his age. "The university has a vested interest in protecting research conducted using our facilities. I've spoken with the head of the Technology Transfer Office, and they're prepared to offer institutional support. With the university's backing, we had access to resources my family couldn't match. The Technology Transfer Office assigned a team to help document the timeline of my research and establish clear ownership of the intellectual property." While this was happening, Marcus implemented additional security measures at the lab. He activated a series of hidden protections I had built into our patent filings, technical details deliberately obscured or omitted that would make the technology unusable without my direct involvement. Even if they somehow got control of the patents, he explained during his visit, they wouldn't be able to make it work without the information only in your head. Jessica focused on gathering affidavits from everyone on our research team, documenting that they had never authorized my family to represent the technology and had never been approached about legitimate acquisition offers. Melissa Chen from Tech Innovator magazine visited under the guise of doing a follow-up story on our research. I shared enough of what was happening to put her on alert without giving her a story that could prematurely go public. "If anything happens to escalate this situation," she promised, "I'll make sure the whole tech world knows about it." That kind of publicity would make any company think twice about proceeding with an acquisition. By the end of the week, Nathan had filed for an emergency injunction and had arranged for a medical evaluation to document my mental competence, countering any potential claims my family might make. Dr. Patel, my treating physician, was appalled when I explained the situation. "Exhaustion and neural inflammation don't affect decision-making capacity once the immediate symptoms are addressed," she stated firmly, adding her professional assessment to our documentation. "There are absolutely no grounds for a competency challenge based on your medical condition." With these protections in place, I finally felt secure enough to focus on my recovery. The stress of the situation had initially set back my progress, but now that I was actively fighting back, my health began to improve rapidly. 2 weeks after the confrontation with my family, Dr. Patel approved my discharge from the hospital, with strict instructions about rest and gradual return to work. "Your brain needs time to fully recover," she cautioned. "I'm only releasing you because you've promised to stay with Jessica and adhere to a strict recovery schedule." I had no intention of returning to my apartment, where my family would have easy access to me. Jessica had prepared her guest room, and the team had arranged a schedule to ensure I was never alone during my initial recovery period. The day I left the hospital, I felt like a completely different person than the one who had been admitted a month earlier. I was physically weaker but mentally stronger. The betrayal had stripped away any illusions I had about my family's motivations and had clarified exactly what I was fighting for. This wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about protecting my autonomy and the integrity of scientific research from those who saw it only as a commodity to be bought and sold. As Jessica drove me away from the hospital, I looked out at the city I had called home all my life and made a silent promise to myself. This was just the beginning of my fight back. My first day out of the hospital was spent at Jessica's apartment, reconnecting with my research team via secure video conference. Seeing their faces, people who had stood by me and protected my work, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you all," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "What you've done during this time, I don't have words." "We're family, Katherine," said Elijah, one of our newest team members. "The kind that actually has your back." The pointed reference to my biological family made the team exchange awkward glances, but I appreciated the sentiment. These people, brought together by science and shared purpose, had proven more loyal than those connected to me by blood. After the call, Jessica updated me on the security measures they had implemented. "The lab is completely locked down," she assured me. "We've moved the most critical components to the university's secure facility, as you suggested. The coherence bubble prototype is safe." Marcus arrived that evening with dinner and news. "The emergency hearing for the injunction is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Nathan says the judge assigned to the case has a background in intellectual property law, which works in our favor." I spent that night reviewing the legal documents Nathan had prepared, making notes and ensuring every detail was accurate. Despite Dr. Patel's instructions to limit my work hours, this couldn't wait. If we didn't secure the injunction, everything else would be at risk. The next morning, dressed in the most professional outfit I could assemble from what Jessica had brought from my apartment, I entered the courthouse with my small team of allies. Nathan had warned me that my family would likely be present, and he was right. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, my father and brother in expensive suits, my mother looking tearful, and Lee noticeably absent. The sight of them no longer triggered pain. Instead, I felt a cold resolve. Their attorney, a senior partner from one of Boston's most prestigious law firms, looked confident as the proceedings began. That confidence visibly faltered as Nathan methodically presented our case. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of unauthorized access to Dr. Mitchell's research facility, attempted misappropriation of intellectual property, and most disturbingly, preparation of documents with what appears to be a forged signature. He submitted the affidavits from my research team, the security logs showing Lee's unauthorized access, and copies of the documents I had discovered in Ryan's briefcase, which Marcus had managed to photograph discreetly during my hospital stay. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the evidence carefully before turning to my family's attorney. Counselor, these are serious allegations. Do your clients deny attempting to negotiate the sale of Dr. Mitchell's research without her explicit authorization? Their lawyer tried to frame it as a family attempting to protect their daughter's interests during a health crisis, but the judge wasn't swayed. Unless you can produce documentation showing Dr. Mitchell granted power of attorney to her family members, their actions appear to have no legal basis. After a 2-hour hearing, the judge ruled in our favor, issuing a temporary restraining order that prevented my family from taking any action regarding my research or intellectual property. She also ordered them to return all materials taken from the lab and prohibited any contact with my research team. As we left the courthouse, I caught my father's eye. Instead of the anger I expected, I saw something that surprised me, respect, however grudging. He gave me a slight nod before turning away. The legal victory was just the beginning. Now we needed to secure the future of the technology on our own terms. That opportunity came from an unexpected source. 2 days after the hearing, I received a call from Sarah Anderson, CEO of Quantum Sphere Industries, a company known for its ethical approach to quantum technology development. Dr. Mitchell, she began, I've been following your work for some time. Recent events have brought your situation to my attention, and I believe we might have mutual interests to discuss. I was initially skeptical, but agreed to a meeting at the university's technology transfer office, with Professor Williams and my legal team present. Sarah Anderson arrived with minimal entourage, just her chief scientific officer and general counsel. Rather than launching into a sales pitch, she began by asking detailed technical questions about the quantum coherence bubble that demonstrated a genuine understanding of the technology. What impressed me most about your approach, she said, is that you've considered the ethical implications from the beginning. Your patents include specific prohibitions against military applications and neural manipulation without consent. This was true, though I was surprised she had read the patent applications that carefully. I had insisted on including ethical constraints in our IP filings, despite being told they might limit commercial potential. Quantum Sphere shares your vision of technology that advances humanity without exploiting it, she continued. We're prepared to offer you a licensing agreement that would preserve your research team's autonomy while providing the resources to develop practical applications. When she named the figure $4 billion for exclusive licensing rights, with royalties on all derived technologies, I thought I had misheard. That's over 1,000 times what TerraCore offered, I said, unable to hide my shock. Sarah smiled. TerraCore was trying to acquire revolutionary technology for pennies on the dollar. They would have buried aspects that competed with their existing products and weaponized the rest. We're offering what it's actually worth, with the commitment to develop it responsibly. The proposed agreement was unlike anything I'd seen before. Rather than an acquisition, it was a true partnership. My research team would become a semi-autonomous division within Quantum Sphere, with guaranteed funding and creative control. The ethical constraints I had insisted on would be contractually binding. We need to discuss this as a team, I told her. This decision affects everyone who's worked on the technology. Of course, Sarah agreed. Take whatever time you need. This offer isn't a ticking clock. That evening, I gathered my entire research team at the university conference room that Professor Williams had arranged for us. I presented Quantum Sphere's offer in full detail, answering questions and facilitating discussion. The debate was thorough and passionate. Some team members were concerned about losing independence. Others saw the vast resources of Quantum Sphere as an opportunity to accelerate our work. I don't want to influence your decision, I told them, but I need to be transparent about our situation. The legal victory gives us temporary protection, but my family or another company could still attempt to gain control. We need institutional backing to secure the long-term future of this technology. After 4 hours of discussion, we took a vote. The result was unanimous in favor of accepting Quantum Sphere's offer, with the addition of some specific protections for the research team that Nathan helped us formulate. The next day, when we presented our counterproposal to Sarah Anderson, she accepted all of our additional terms without hesitation. "This is how true innovation happens," she said as we shook hands. "Not through hostile takeovers or family betrayals, but through partnership and shared vision." 2 weeks later, after thorough legal review, I sat in Quantum Sphere's Boston offices, signing the licensing agreement that would shape the future of quantum neural interface technology and secure $4 billion for its continued development. As I signed my name, I thought about how differently this could have ended if my family had succeeded in their plan. The technology would have been sold for a fraction of its value, its potential possibly buried by corporate interests, and my research team scattered. Instead, we were now positioned to bring quantum neural interfaces to the world on our own terms, with the ethical safeguards I had always insisted were non-negotiable. The pen felt heavier than usual as I completed my signature, weighed with the responsibility of the decision and the journey that had brought me here. "Congratulations, Dr. Mitchell," Sarah said as we stood to shake hands again. "This is just the beginning." She was right. It was just the beginning, not just of a new chapter for the technology, but of a new chapter in my life as well. The months following the Quantum Sphere agreement brought transformations I could never have anticipated. With the company's resources behind us, we moved from our makeshift lab to a state-of-the-art research facility in Cambridge. Our team expanded from 12 to 50, bringing in talent from around the world. The most profound changes, however, were personal. My family made several attempts to reconcile after news of the $4 billion licensing deal became public. My father called repeatedly, leaving messages that evolved from angry, "You could have trusted us with this," to conciliatory, "We only wanted what was best for you," to something approaching remorseful, "Perhaps we misjudged the situation." Ryan sent expensive gifts that I returned unopened. My mother wrote long emails explaining their perspective and asking for understanding. Lee was the only one who offered a genuine apology, admitting that she had betrayed my trust for financial incentives my brother had offered her. After much reflection and several sessions with a therapist specializing in family trauma, I made the difficult decision to maintain distance from them, at least for the foreseeable future. Some betrayals cut too deep for quick forgiveness, and I needed to focus on healing myself and advancing the technology without their complication. "Family isn't just about blood," my therapist Dr. Rivera observed during one of our sessions. "It's about trust, respect, and mutual support. Sometimes the family we build is healthier than the family we're born into." This resonated deeply with me. My research team had become my chosen family. Jessica, who had stood by me through the worst of the crisis, became my closest friend and confidante. Warkus, with his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty, was like the brother I wished I'd had. The newer team members brought fresh energy and perspectives that enriched both our work and our growing community. With Quantum Sphere's backing, we established the Mitchell Foundation for Ethical Technology, dedicated to ensuring that advances in quantum computing and neural interfaces would benefit humanity rather than exploit it. The foundation funded scholarships, organized conferences on tech ethics, and created guidelines for responsible innovation that were adopted by research institutions worldwide. Our first real-world application wasn't the commercial product many had expected, but a medical breakthrough, a neural interface that helped patients with severe spinal injuries regain partial sensory function. Seeing a young woman feel her hand for the first time in 5 years brought me to tears during our initial clinical trials. "This is why we protected the technology," Jessica whispered as we watched the woman's face transform with joy. "This is what would have been lost." The scientific community that had once been skeptical of our work now celebrated it. Awards and recognition flowed in, culminating in a nomination for the Nobel Prize in Physics that still seems surreal when I think about it. Through it all, I maintained the strict work-life balance that my hospitalization had forced me to recognize as essential. No more sleeping in the lab, no more 70-hour work weeks, no more sacrificing health for progress. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took a complete collapse for me to learn this crucial lesson. You know what I realized? I told Jessica during one of our weekend hikes a new ritual we had established for mental and physical health. If my family had succeeded in taking the technology, I might have actually been freed from my own worst tendencies. I was killing myself with overwork before the collapse. Maybe, Jessica replied thoughtfully. But you would have lost something precious in the process, the ability to see your vision realized on your own terms. Sometimes we need to learn balance without losing what matters most. She was right. The true victory wasn't the monetary value of the licensing deal, impressive as it was. It was the preservation of scientific integrity and ethical purpose that might have been compromised or lost entirely under different ownership. The betrayal by my family, painful as it was, had ultimately led to growth and clarity. It stripped away illusions and forced me to recognize who truly stood with me and what truly mattered. It taught me that innovation without ethics is hollow, that work without health is unsustainable, and that trust must be earned rather than assumed. Most importantly, it showed me my own strength. I had built something world-changing, protected it from those who would exploit it, and created a framework to ensure it would benefit humanity for generations to come. The quantum neural interfaces we continue to develop are creating bridges between human and machine, between thought and action, between limitation and possibility. But perhaps the most important bridges are those we build between people who share values and vision, who support rather than exploit each other, and who understand that true innovation must serve humanity's highest potential. If you're watching this and facing your own challenges, whether from family pressure, betrayal, or the struggle to protect your creative work, remember that the path is rarely straight, but staying true to your core values will guide you through the darkest moments. Build your support system carefully, protect your health as fiercely as your ideas, and remember that the value of what you create goes far beyond any dollar amount. I'd love to hear your stories of overcoming betrayal or protecting your creative work in the comments below. Has someone ever tried to take credit for your ideas or creations? How did you handle it? Share your experiences, hit the subscribe button for more stories about innovation and resilience, and don't forget to like this video if you found value in my journey. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, sometimes the greatest challenges lead to the most meaningful transformation.